Just a quick introduction. My name is Bennick. I'm from Weber State University. My job title is kind of fancy. It's Director of Computing Services, but it really means just jack of all trades. You just do everything. The idea behind the presentation, which I called System Administration with a Side of Security, was kind of a practical application with free tools. And at first I tried to think about what I did with those tools and looked at specific instances. But the thing is, there in our environment, we have some really nice and expensive stuff that goes with it, some incident management software, CrowdStrike, that type of stuff. And so I didn't really want to make it so specific to that it wasn't applicable to everybody else. So it's been through multiple revisions. The idea is I tried to make it more universally applicable so that regardless of what your size is, big or small, I hope you could just get some ideas that might help you improve things in your area, maybe make your life a little bit easier. There's a ton just of free stuff out there that you may or may not need, and there's probably going to be a couple of things that I show or talk about that you already know about. And a couple of words just at the beginning here. Make sure you check the terms and conditions of the tools before you start using them. I know a big thing we run into is there's stuff out there that's free for personal use, but when you put it on your enterprise system, you're stuck paying for it, or you're supposed to. Get approval to use it in your environment, and a big reason behind that is sometimes some of the administrative tools, especially for remote administration, can trigger incidents, and if nobody's expecting it, it can be alarming. I've seen that several times actually with Sysinternals and some of the other things, because they can be used for privilege escalation and lateral movement, and sometimes hackers use them, but they're really useful for legitimate reasons too. And these are all things that I've used before and found to be useful. I tried not to just Google a list of stuff, bring a bunch of junk, and then talk about it, because that's not really what the point is. Everybody can do that. And I just also want to say, I'm not making a personal endorsement of companies that produce these products. Sometimes there's really good stuff that's put out there by companies as contributions to the community that's part of what they do. But it doesn't mean that I'm saying go out and buy this product or take your business to this vendor. I just think that one specific thing is good. So I'm going to go on a couple of fundamentals. This is just because I have to start somewhere. And I'm not going to spend time discussing these because they're really basic. But it's kind of an assumption when I talk about this stuff that there's a few things that have been done already. I would hope that you have a good set of policies in place so that you actually know what you're doing and hold people accountable. You got to have support from the management, because really, if you don't, you're in big trouble and you'll never get your job done. Make sure you've identified user roles. This is really important for the next part, which is permissions and privileges, because different users need different permissions. Most, everyday productivity users don't need to be admins, and maybe developers do. So make sure you know that. And PowerShell, it's so useful if you're managing computers in a Windows environment. I know they say it's a cross-platform. The cross-platform applicability is limited in my opinion and experience, but for Windows, 100%, that's just kind of a need-to-know thing if you want to make your life easier. So going to the next part, this is also going to be really brief, just some suggestions for next steps after you get down to the basics. There's a lot of good security baselines and templates available through Microsoft. That's a good place to start to figure out what kind of security you want to implement. Learn about Windows WMI, which is their management instrumentation. So this is useful in both your scripting and if you're a developer creating your apps in C#. It basically gives you all the information about objects and classes and everything you could recall from Windows that would be useful in doing stuff. Maybe learn a little bit about ports and protocols, know how to collect Windows logs, and also read and understand a good portion of it. This one is kind of something I prefer, but I just suggest try to standardize with one hardware source or vendor if possible. I know a lot of times it's not due to budgetary, but there are vendor tools that are very useful that you get to take advantage of by primarily going with one manufacturer. You just get good group policies if you have a domain set up, and don't feel bad about copying what others have done, because that's a good place to start to find out what they've done and apply it. And a couple of recommendations that maybe you want to do right now is disable Excel 4.0 macros, block Internet Explorer because of an MS-HTML vulnerability in docs. I know that was talked about a little bit in the keynote. Those are ones that are kind of exploited frequently or attempted to exploit. And just think about things you can combine, tools or procedures to make better. Do what works for you. And a good example actually of one that I've used a lot is when automating things, especially with reporting and information gathering, PowerShell has a built-in option that you can email stuff out. So we use basically an SMTP relay server to email our reports, and then they actually show up automatically in Box so that you can just go in there and collect them or run them on a regular basis and have them, a historical archive. So that's a really easy but useful combination of things. So I'll start out by the next section. It's just a little bit about human risk management. So from the side that I work in, the biggest risk are the people. I do a little bit of server administration, but it's primarily user workstations. So when you're thinking about how to apply security and policies in that area, how to configure machines, just think about those people. You got to know your users, but think about how you can work with their interactions with the machines to mitigate problems. Good thing is user session whitelists. If you have a domain, maybe not let every authenticated user log into every computer. Maybe try to create security groups, and you can automate that by putting people in the right OUs based on departments or whatever, so that they get updated automatically. But that'll limit access to computers to people that might have some kind of a reason to get into them. Microsoft Labs, that's a good one for remote administration. If you have people that are standard users but maybe need to have the ability to install something, you can generate that random password or connect and help them with that. Hardened RDP connections, if you went to the privilege escalation stuff and saw the Mimikatz, maybe they showed it how you can dump the memory processes from basically open RDP sessions to steal people's credentials that are stored in clear text. So there's some things about that, especially when you're connecting to servers or sensitive systems. There's an admin session that helps protect you. Disable password saving. Least privilege model Windows credential guard is another good one to keep yourself safe. So next part, going to talk a little bit about automation. These are things that I've done that we found to be helpful. So Windows Task Scheduler, if you don't have access to System Center Configuration Manager, this is just something that's built into Windows. Yeah, and there's all kinds of hooks that can be used to execute scripts or gather information, pretty much anything that you could think of to create a recurring event. And the result is you can basically create reports, email them to a Box account, and collect that stuff. So I'm going to pull up a couple of examples here of stuff that we've already done. So I got one. So this is going to be a report on a specific workstation about their largest folders. So there could be somebody calling and complaining, oh, I'm out of space, or I'm getting this warning that I can't save. You might want to know where all their data is being used. So This one is talking about where it actually just lists every folder and what the size and the number of files are of all those things. So as we can see here, it lists all the size, percentages of what the total storage is. It's useful for trying to figure it out if they're making that type of complaint. It can be done remotely, gathered remotely. It's a pretty easy tool if you're going to do that. That's through PowerShell. Windows stability metrics. Let me pull this up. I don't think this will show properly in Box. We'll try. This one gives you a rating of application stability, and if they have unstable or unstable applications, it can give you an indication of maybe why it failed. So as you can see here on this workstation, it gives us information from the system logs. Application failed to start. Application error, and this can help you actually predict problems before they happen. So if you have a lot of systems, you could scan this and pull it up when people ask about it. If you only manage a few systems, you can actually create a report that tells you what your most unreliable apps are. Oh, actually, there's another one I'm going to show you. The battery health, that's another good one if you manage a lot of computers. I'll skip some of these just because they're more ideas, free space and files. Microsoft Safety Scanner, that's actually a good plan B if you have an incident management that comes up and you want to find out more about what's going on. Maybe you don't know if it's a false positive or a true positive. Microsoft has a safety scanner app built into Windows, so you can actually generate those reports, pull them up remotely, and see what it says. And it'll actually give you an indication of stuff that's been modified in the registry, what change was made, what it could be a hint of. It's basically just a tool to give you more information. Let's see. So audit logins and audit failed logins. So this is a pretty useful one. And I'm going to see if I can pull up this report here just to make sure I can show you here. So if you have nice tools, you could actually pull this up through something else. But if you don't, maybe you suspect somebody is logging into your computer when they're supposed to be closed. Could be a different employee, or could be staff somewhere else. These ones I've actually got stored in a different folder here. So this is actually an add-on PowerShell module that you can get from the PowerShell Gallery, which I think it was made for Azure, but it works just fine on most workstations. So this takes information from the Windows logs. Tells you about what, the name of the computer, what type of log it came from, the provider, event type, audit failure. So these could be, some of these are part of the security scan. So just when I ran this one, it's got me, I probably put in the password wrong. Security scan, this is actually our vulnerability scanner. It's not too eventful on here because there wasn't anything malicious going on, but you could see right away if you had somebody that wasn't authorized to be logging in, that was connecting. We'll go on. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You can whitelist extensions in Chrome and Edge. It's really useful if you have a problem with people installing coupon clippers or whatever they don't need, disk space reports. So I'm going to move on to the tools section, which is actually the bulk of this presentation. So rather than creating a bunch of PowerPoint slides that kind of have static images, I'm going to go through some of these and pull them up. We'll go through the links actually on this first one. It's a tool called Wmix, and I found this useful in maintaining our images. You know, a lot of machines with updated drivers, you might image them and then they fail right away because maybe they don't have the NVMe controller or they might not have the right network adapter. This is a script in PowerShell that has a GUI. While I'm waiting for that to pop up, I'll go to the page here. So this blog or our page is a good resource for tools, which I'll include in the information I'm going to make available to everybody. But it's part of the free tools this MS Endpoint Manager suite provides to people. And sometimes this takes a second to load. But essentially what it does is it takes your WIM images that you captured maybe through System Center, or you could have done it through like a Windows MTT, or if you do your own, and allows you to essentially inject the updates, drivers, some customizations, a lot of stuff, language packs you can add or remove things. And if you image a lot of computers and you get tired of sitting around for the updates to finish, this is really useful because you can essentially keep an up-to-date image all the time, or we update ours weekly, just adding relevant drivers or updates to it. That way it saves you a little bit of considerable time, I should say, if you have a lot of computers, and makes life just a little easier in that regard. And I don't know if it eventually pulls up. I'll go on. So the Wmix tool actually goes really good with this one. It's called Modern Driver Management. And this is a tool provided by the same company. There's a lot of things you can do. So this one actually can work together with your domain, and it uses WMI to actually scan the vendor and the model number of all your machines. Then you can actually download the driver packages. You can automate this so that at a given interval, all the driver packages for all your supported devices are updated. You can actually also use some of this stuff as part of a task sequence. So if you use PowerShell, if you have Windows PE with PowerShell integrated, there's some stuff you can do with this tool to automate injection of drivers while you're downloading and imaging things. And there's a little bit of extra configuration involved. Otherwise, I'd pull it up for you, but I've used this one in my office. This one's up now, so this is a Wim which has the GUI here. So as you can see, you can import your existing images, which would be on your System Center server. You know, you can insert scripts to be done as part of that image installation. Drivers here, you can inject entire directories or individual files. Autopilot, so if you want to get rid of some of those prompts when you're setting up a computer. Configuration manager, integration, a lot of stuff, you know, useful for maintaining your packages or your images. So real quick, I'm going to just talk about some of the tools I use that are vendor specific. So I know Lenovo has them, HP has them. For Dell, I use, it's called Command Configure, which is actually able to modify BIOS settings. So you get a bunch of computers, you want to make sure TPM is enabled on all of them. Wake on LAN, vPro, or whatever you want. You can actually configure this to automatically apply those BIOS settings. And it can be scripted, inserted as your task sequence. We also have group policies. So if we make a change to whatever our configuration is, it applies automatically to all those machines that we manage. Dell Command Update is actually another great tool that they provide. So it automates the updating of BIOS and system drivers. And if anybody's ever had to manually go and update BIOS on 50 machines, what a big time saver it is when you can automate that. And a little bit of warning for automating BIOS updates, they can occasionally trigger BitLocker. So if you're running full disk encryption with BitLocker, make sure you're also storing all your keys somewhere, either in an Active Directory, or you could be downloading them. Store them somewhere, because occasionally you'll hit that and you don't want to be stuck without a unlock key. So we're going to go on next to what would be considered information gathering. So these ones here are tools that can be used inside of other scripts, PowerShell typically, and they provide information that I find useful in management. There's WizTree, which is actually a very fast disk space analyzer, can create a report about how many files you have where, similar to what I showed you before, but a lot more detailed with graphical output. I think it makes like a block type diagram where there's colored squares that tell you each type of file and how much space they're taking up in relative to the entire disk. WinDirstat, that's similar. There's also chainsaw log analysis. So this is one that I actually just found out about recently. And only used it a couple of times, but it is an open source tool that can be used for analyzing a large number of logs. So you're gathering logs from 50 different machines. Maybe you're looking for specific events or trends. And I read a lot of blog posts. This is one from Bleeping Computer. This is actually one that I found out about. So log management seems to be one of the things that there's not a lot of good open source tools out there for. There's a few, but they're so hard to come by or specific that anything you can get your hands on is useful. So this is a good tool if you're doing log analysis. I recommend checking it out. There's a list here of what you can do. Search through event logs for specific event IDs, keywords, or regex patterns. Extract and parse Window Defender, basically antivirus alerts. Detect users being created or added to user groups. Key events, attempts to brute force accounts, RDP logins, etc. So the idea with this is if there's something going on in the big picture, maybe a bunch of your computers are being brute forced. You might not see it on the outside, but if you're doing an analysis, you could pick it up by saying there's 10,000 failed login attempts across 50 different machines, and it's a good little tool for log analysis, so that you don't have to actually go through and look at all of those things. WinMerge. So if you've ever had two things that you need to look at side by side, could be maybe you're looking at a driver package to determine what's been changed or what models are supported or have been added. Could be text file, could be anything, a program, could be something that's detected by your incident management response. If you have a known good version of that file, you want to see what it looks like next to one that's in question. And this was useful recently. We had an event pull up that was, I think it was Intel AMT. So there was a driver that was detected as having privilege escalation in CrowdStrike, but it was seemed like a pretty benign daily thing. So essentially pull up the known good version, look at it side by side with the one that was being detected as being malicious, and you could see right away the only thing that really had changed is some of the information formatting. There wasn't a whole lot, so it was probably a false positive generated by an accidental report of that application hash to their AI, which happens sometimes. So it's a good thing though when you don't know about what the situation is to try to verify it some way. And that's one use. There's an infinite number of ways you can use WinMerge. HXD hex editor, that's probably one a lot of people have heard about. It's just a good freeware hex editor. It also allows you to do a quick and dirty dump of memory processes, which I like. So if you maybe want to see if you have insecure RDP sessions, you can go ahead and pull this up and try to dump your memory processes, search them for clear text examples of your usernames and passwords, and this is also one that may trigger an incident management. So if you are memory dumping processes, that can get detected by the AI as an attempt to steal credentials. So that's one you want to just kind of think about. Application management. These are things that could help you create or distribute packages. System Center Configuration Manager has its own built-in thing for application distribution, but you might not have access to that. So Chocolatey is great, open source tool. I use it all the time, and they have public repositories for just about everything you could think of. And the most common apps for sure. If you install the Chocolatey module into Chrome, or not in Chrome, into PowerShell, then you can actually remotely install and update apps to users, if they're on your domain or if they're outside your domain. Make it a scheduled task to run that command. You could do Choco update Chrome, I think is what it would be, and that would just update Chrome to the latest version or whatever application that you have that installed with Chocolatey. So it does have the option to actually create your own repositories. There's free repository software. One of them is Nexus, NuGet. You can use Visual Studio Code to create your packages. It requires a little bit of work, but for free, it's a great alternative. A lot easier than going and taking a USB drive and plugging it in everywhere. MSIX Application Packager. So this is a fairly new one, and we've used it a few times for applications that are really tricky with trying to think of a good example. We have one app that stores registration key and the user information in the user profile, but we have multiple users that log into that machine, which means every time a new person logs in, that application has to be reactivated, but it deactivates the last time. So you just have this mess of constantly having to enter the key and reactivate it. With the MSI packager, you can basically rewrap the installer to do stuff like, say, we want to run it as the same user every time. So regardless of who's logged in, you can define a specific user. And to the users, it's pretty much transparent. They just run and install it as normal. But you include the registration key, installs, runs as that same user every time. And there are applications that are packaged with MSIX are more similar to containers than they are to traditional Windows installs. So if you're familiar with how that works, it's a much cleaner and safer way of installing things. Since when that application package is deployed, everything, registry keys, it's essentially packaged as a separate layer, almost a container on top of the OS. So adding and removing apps is really easy. Doing arguments, you could totally redesign how an application is installed or how it appears to the user during the install process, or take something that wouldn't be a transparent install and install it. And it has a ton of features. I haven't been able to explore it all yet, but It's very useful. So master packager, this is one I think I'll pull up here and show you. So this is another free application packager similar to MSI Packager, MSIX, but provided by a third party. And nice thing about this is it's another one of those tools that can be very useful, but it's difficult to come by. There's a lot of options that cost money to go out there and package applications, but not a lot that are free. Let's see if I can pull something out here real quick. Yeah. So you can take existing MSI installers, make this bigger, pull them up in the packager, and modify the parameters of that MSI installation. Or you can just see what it has inside of it. Sometimes maybe you want to know what registry keys this application is going to add to your machine. That's another good use of this. You can actually open existing app packages, browse what those are going to be. Maybe you have a questionable application that you got from somewhere, but you just want to make sure it's safe. Change the icons. As you would expect in a package manager, you can just pretty much modify it any way you want. You can change the install and uninstall parameters, where its location is, all that good stuff. If you want it installed, user data or program files, a lot of useful things can be done with an application packager. PS App Deploy Toolkit. This is one I think I've used it once or twice, but when I did use it, it was actually pretty useful. So this is essentially a toolkit designed for pushing out applications via PowerShell. So this can be useful just about any environment. You can use that app packager, one I just showed you, to create a new application package or rewrap an existing one. And then you can just do a mass deployment with these PowerShell app deployment toolkit. I won't go through all of the information on that. It's all available on the website here, but it tells you, you can integrate it with SCCM or standalone. All right, so I'm going to go on to a couple of things now that I think are just primarily making life a little bit easier. So Client Center for Configuration Manager. Now this is an open source project on GitHub that works with Microsoft Configuration Manager, but it kind of consolidates a lot of the little things and gives you an interesting interface. It's actually available in the Microsoft Store too, so it's something that can be installed quite easily. There it is. So you can essentially connect to a computer on the network or in the domain, IP address, machine name. Oh, I got to run it as an administrator. That's why it's not working. Come on. Maybe if my right click would work. Um, so some of the things that I think are really useful about this is it's got some good monitoring tools. You can monitor processes in real time. You can see what services are running. It's got the event monitor, which is information that will end up in your system logs. But this tells me all processes that are running, Adobe CEF helper. You can also actually remotely terminate processes. So say if I want to get rid of this, somebody's complaining about something that's taking up a lot of resources, making the computer slow. Right-click it, kill process. It's going to terminate that on that machine, just as if you had done it from their task manager. It's got some inventory information, so you can actually see what software has been installed. Gives you a list of stuff. Some information about the hardware, can tell you kind of hardware installed, make and model, serial numbers, stuff of that nature, power settings, a lot of neat little things that are kind of combined into this user interface. Software distribution, this is kind of a quick and dirty way of pushing out applications via PowerShell. And the nice thing about this tool is if you have stuff that you need to install, needs administrative credentials, this will actually encrypt the credentials for the user you're logged in as or the user that you run it as. That way, if you're executing something remotely, installing software, the credentials aren't available in clear text or in a file or something to be stolen. They're actually encrypted and used to authenticate on the remote machine. So as long as you have admin privileges on that machine, everything should work as expected. You can actually open a remote PowerShell terminal. There's some stuff here for reporting. Let's see if there's anything interesting. AMT status check. Yeah, so it's a nifty little tool, really, that you can use. We use it occasionally just to troubleshoot things. So Sysinternals, this one's been around a long time, and I think a lot of people are going to know about this and have used it before. But this is really powerful extension to Microsoft PowerShell. Really good for doing networking, diagnostic troubleshooting, remote administration. It was just recently updated to actually be in the Microsoft Store, so you can have it updated automatically. A word of warning, though, this is something that will almost certainly be detected by your incident management software, simply because it has so many functions that are done with administrative privileges or stuff that would normally not be done remotely. There's a whole list of things here for file and disk utilities. We use these as part of our scripts for doing all kinds of things. You can, I think there's like a speed test in here. So someone's complaining about slow internet. We create a script which actually outputs what all of their network connections are, their configurations, does a speed test against a designated server, it tells you what their transfer rates are, creates a report, emails it to Box, we open it up, and then we kind of have an idea of where to start when we're troubleshooting complaints of slow access. Security utilities, so auto log on. It's basically a better way of doing if you have an instance where you have a machine that you need to boot straight into an application like a kiosk maybe, slightly improved way of doing that. Gives you information about logged in sessions, rootkit revealer, can scan, you can set up to scan remotely via script looking for hints of a rootkit. Let's see, just a lot of information about hardware, miscellaneous, super useful. So this is probably the most useful PowerShell suite that we use, just because it has so many useful tools inside of it. So I got a couple of little things here. I mean, Macs, they do exist, and we got some of them in our environment. So I did include a couple of things we've used before to help with that. There's a really good little profile creator. Anybody that's ever tried making an MDM or using Apple's managing thing, what is it? I can't remember. Yeah, anyway, it stinks when you're managing profiles for iPads or laptops and stuff like that. So there is a pretty good Git project available, and it's just called Profile Creator. And the application itself isn't actively maintained, but the modules that are used in the application are. So you can use the source code and recompile it for new versions of OS X. Big Sur, for example, has been updated by community users rather than the original author. But for still a majority of the Macs out there, you can use this to actually create profiles that will still work. The one catch right now is if you use the one that's on this page, you may have to have a Mac with an older version of the OS to make the profile creator work, but the profiles that you generate will work perfectly fine on the newer versions of the OS, since the settings are all the same. And I mean, there's a ton you can do, hundreds of options. If you've ever created profiles, you know you can customize everything. Brigadier. So this is an interesting tool. Anybody that has an Intel Mac that still has the ability to do boot camp, some of that setup and install can be automated with this tool. It basically scans the model number from the BIOS, automatically downloads the driver packages from Apple server, and then after that, it's up to you. But if you, let's say, want to get rid of the Mac OS or add another partition with Windows, you can create task sequences in System Center that create the image. You use the Brigadier command to download the driver packages and essentially continue your installation, put it all together, boot it up, have a working version of Windows, and saves you the time of messing around with Boot Camp. Doesn't work with the M1 Macs, unfortunately. That's just a different world. Couple of words, these are just shout-outs. I'm not going to talk about them really, because the oldies but goldies, they're just good tools in general. Other people, I'm sure, will talk about them way more. Notepad++, it's just a good text editor in general for opening scripts really quick and looking at stuff. Wireshark doesn't really need much introduction. I've used it several times when troubleshooting issues with file shares or stuff like that. Trying to track down why this app doesn't work when it should. It could be one single protocol isn't working. VMware Horizon, that was a good one. That setting that up has all kinds of things you need to configure on the firewall. PuTTY, SSH still exists all over the place. Being able to access it from Windows is great. AppLocker, it's probably a bit of an underappreciated tool. If you run an environment where you can't make everybody a standard user, but you can do application limitations on what they install, this is the way to do it. It's basically provided by Windows. You can define applications, limit them either by version or not limit them by version. You can just limit them by application name. So you might want them to be able to install every version of Zoom or every version newer than 5.0. Set that all up in app locker, and even though the users are administrative users, if they try to do stuff outside of what's defined, they just can't. So I got some honorable mentions here. Oh, so these are tools that are pretty specific to maybe if you have healthcare records in your area. There's the Health and Human Services provides some useful little tools. There's Security Risk Assessment Tool, SRA tool. This is mostly a question and answer thing. The trick with this is you have to be honest, so it'll go through and ask you a whole bunch of branching questions that helps you evaluate where you're at from a compliance standpoint and what you can do to improve. If you don't know where to start, this is a perfect place to start because it's essentially not very technical. You just install the app, you run it, generates reports, and gives you an idea of what to do next. Oh, this is another one provided by Health and Human Services, Security Content Automation Protocol. So it's another tool just to help you check if you're, where you're at with compliance. Has a wide range of compatibility. Install guide. This one's a little bit more technical to set up. So good information sources. The backbone to staying on top of things is just develop a list of good information sources. Maybe create a mailing list, whatever works for you. In fact, I use essentially, like FeedBurner, I think is what it is. I've used that before. But essentially create your own feed of these sites that you find interesting that will have news for you. That it tells you what's going on in the world of security. Could be what zero-day exploits are, what the new tools are, what people are doing, good ideas. This one here I find especially intriguing, system deploy. So this guy's a system administrator that he just provides a ton of useful ideas. He has done all kinds of cool stuff. He's replaced all of the default Visual Basic MDT scripts with PowerShell stuff. He provides Intune reporting, tells you how to make .NET menus for PowerShell-based applications so you can have a more traditional GUI. Maybe you want to make a one-click button application that sets up a bunch of applications in Windows, and you can do that. He's got all kinds of stuff. Highly recommended just to see what he's got because it's just really neat. He's really talented. A PowerShell Gallery, that's of course Microsoft sponsored one. Tons of tools, modules to extend PowerShell to do pretty much anything you want. One of them that I was looking at recently was actually Duo. I don't see it on here, but maybe it's in the Git. But just about anything you could want to do is available through the PowerShell Gallery. You basically take what they give you, customize it to do what you want. The sky's the limit. A couple other good places. Oh, this is another new one I found, the CyberDrain. This just recently. This is something I found through the Microsoft MVP, which is Most Valuable Professionals page. He does a lot of cloud stuff, managing Microsoft 365. He gives you a lot of just free automations, and this guy's also a major contributor to a lot of the large system management and application packages. So whatever he gives away for free is actually probably worth thousands of dollars, and you'd pay thousands of dollars if you bought it through one of his collaborators. A couple of things at the bottom here. These are free tools that are marked with an asterisk because they kind of have a They might try to make you sign up for their email list. I actually still think they're really good. This one here, Wmix, is very useful. So if you're just getting into WMI and what you can do, this is actually a really nice tool because it essentially lets you browse everything. So you can just find locally, remotely. You can browse what the WMI objects are, get an idea of what you want to put in a script, or export what you find. They do make you put your name and information in here. That's why I marked it with an asterisk, but I use a burner account for that. I have a spam account that I'm sure a lot of people do. You can just sign up and then download the tool. They don't make you verify anything after you put your information in. Recast RightClick Tools. Another one you have to sign up before they remove the wall, but this is a free tool. Essentially adds more actions to your right-click menus. So you can customize these on your own. You can go to the registry and customize what shows up when you right-click, but this adds a lot of other useful functions that may extend the functionality of tools like System Center. They packaged it all together to make it a little bit of a slicker experience or quicker to get to things so you don't have to click through a bunch of extra links. Windows Tweaker tool, there's some things, fixing permissions, maybe fixing Windows Updater. Sometimes things happen that you just can't figure out. This is something I've used before. Their page is just packed with ads. So the tool itself is free. Once you get it, there's no pop-ups or advertisements or anything. It does have a banner, but the making sure you find out which download link to click on, that's a tricky part. So that's why I put it with an asterisk. And it's a good tool, though. I put the wrong link, though. But let's see if there's anything else. I mean, that about summarizes it. I have a few minutes left. I apologize for going so fast. I signed up for the 1-hour presentation imagining it was going to seem like it took forever, and then when I realized the content that I had and how much there is out there, yeah, it seemed like I should have signed up for 2 or 3 hours. But I wanted to ask if anybody has any questions or wants to see anything, know anything. I'm going to actually provide just a list with all the stuff, the links to all the sites, and talk to Chris afterwards, and they're going to put it up somewhere on the SAINTCON site so that anybody that's interested in these can go back and look at them in more detail. And yeah, it's a lot of useful things in here. But any questions?
Maybe one question.
Uh-huh.
A lot of organizations are like working with endpoint management solutions. What one have you used that you like, or that you like?
Which one was that?
Endpoint management.
Oh, endpoint management. Let's see. I'm trying to think without. So I've got one right now I use called Goverlan, which I really like. Try not to give an endorsement because when I signed up for it, I said, not going to promote anything. But System Center, Configuration Manager has some endpoint management stuff if you're using Windows Defender. We have CrowdStrike and Rapid7. We have so many things that just work together. Oh my gosh, it's hard to pick out one in particular because we use all of the stuff. But Goverlan, I think, is one that I have used a lot and liked a lot. And there's lots out there. It just depends on what your needs are. If you need compliance, if you need FIPS compliance, there's not a whole lot. So if you need certain levels of compliance, that's one thing that really you need to look at when you're doing your endpoint management. Like if it supports like MFA authentication, that's really important because if you're doing any type of remote administration in an environment that requires high level of security, Some example I used was the FIPS. So if you're working in the federal government, anywhere that requires clearance, you have to have their cards, and any endpoint management solution you have would need to be FIPS compliant. It's hard to say what I like because it's more applicable to what you need, but yeah, there's a lot of options. Is there anything else? All right. Well, thank you guys. I think this is the last presentation of the day, so if you want to come up and talk to me about anything, I'll be here all week. I appreciate your time.